A lot of digital currencies, including that one, which for the first time surpassed 20,000. Another milestone, an eye-popping rally, really, when you consider where the cryptocurrency was just earlier this year. And there are a couple of factors that go into the rally that we've seen. Certainly, you look at everything we talk about every day, you know, stimulus out of Washington, stimulus in this country, central banks keeping rates at record low, pouring tons of money into the world's economy. These are factors that have played into the story of Bitcoin. But also, we are keeping an eye on the fact that you've got high-profile investors and established companies that are increasingly embracing this cryptocurrency world and the Bitcoin world, which is sometimes what people talk about, the story of Bitcoin versus gold and some of the differences there. Somebody knows a lot about this world, an early investor in Bitcoin and other cryptocurrencies, Mike Novogratz of Galaxy Digital, who today, along with CI, have just launched a new fund that is very much focused on Bitcoin. And Mike joins us now. Mike, thanks for being with us as always.
John, you're starting to sound like a Bitcoin salesman.
It's certainly not my goal, but you have
story down pretty darn well.
Yeah, well, I mean, like, you have to sit here and make sense of these things, and I think that you've been pounding the table on this for years. I think, what's changed, though, is that for a time there was that criticism and skepticism, and that has started to change. I mean, what has stood out for you this year?
Listen, there are two things that really are at play here. One is the macro story, which you very well articulated, right? We've got debasement of fiat currencies and this explosion of deficits around the world. And maybe the bigger story is, though, the institutionalization. When you look at our project today with the CI funds, right, it's $202 billion asset manager in U.S. terms. So a giant asset manager, an institution coming into the space. We're seeing that all around the world, from hedge funds to insurance companies now in the U.S., the big institutions like CI. And that's making the bulk of wealth feel more and more comfortable with putting their money in Bitcoin. It is now an institutional asset. It's not this kind of, strange thing that lives on the internet.
Well, and there's a lot of similarities, it feels to me, with what you're saying to what we've been talking about with Tesla, which is basically, Tesla's a week away from being added to the S&P 500, and a lot of very respected analysts on Wall Street said, look, do the simple math. If there are a lot of institutional investors who have to buy Tesla to keep pace with the market, then ultimately that's the math. So some of that fits in with the Bitcoin story as well. I guess I wonder, Mike, like, you are a long-term thinker. You're willing to be aggressive when you need to be. You certainly were in these waters when a lot of people weren't. But when we're talking about funds, and a company like CI, for example, is there a danger that we're talking about an asset class that still might be a little too volatile for the average investor?
I think that was a story of a few years ago when it's becoming less of a story. I think the macro deterioration in balance sheets is a real story. And if you think about just the loss of purchasing power that consumers are having year in, year out, think about how many hours you have to work to take that high-end vacation, or how many hours you have to work to buy a house. That's going against us. So there is inflation out there. And, Bitcoin is a really good hedge to inflation. There will be volatility, right? The regulators are still scrambling to try to really understand how to think about digital currencies. Right? Banks want to protect themselves from what could be an assault on their business. Governments are nervous. And so we're going to have volatility, but vol's going lower and lower each year. And as institutions come in, we're seeing retail. Bitcoin used to be a fully retail product. Retail hands selling into big institutional hands. And institutions aren't going to buy one day and sell the next. And so you're getting deeper and deeper pockets participating.
Yeah, that's interesting too. I mean, I think what I'm curious about, obviously, that regulatory reality, and that whenever we see a moment of perhaps cautiousness in 2020, there's been a lot of optimism, but when there's been a moment of pause, if you will, it's because you hear about some maybe change in policy or regulation surrounding the group. I wonder if watching both the banks who are embracing this and the regulatory road is important, because usually the banks and the regulators are fairly closely aligned.
Yeah, it's listen, it's going to be a evolving process, and especially where end of one administration in the U.S., we got a new one coming in, and so you're going to have a new head of the SEC, a new, chairman of the CFTC. The same thing with Janet Yellen at Treasury, and so we'll be picking up the signals from them on how they embrace it. It's not just Bitcoin; it's stable coins, it's digital payments, it's an entire revolution that's coming.
And it still doesn't hit a lot of people on a day-to-day basis. Early on during the boom, probably when we were talking with you a couple of years ago, people were like, I can't see it. Where is it? I don't see it in my daily transactions. I know debits and all that kind of stuff. I guess we'll see what plays out on that part. But as a long-term investor in this area, and now this new offering with CI, if people are just coming to the table with Bitcoin prices at 20,000, what should they think about?
Listen, right now, Bitcoin is about 3% of the market cap of gold. And if you see how viral it's going, how many new institutions, how many new platforms allow you to buy it, from PayPal to pretty soon Facebook. Facebook's got 2 billion users that will have access to be able to buy Bitcoin on their Novi wallets that are going to get launched in the first quarter. You're going to see more and more adoption. And so I would think by the 12 to 18 months, we could be 10% of the gold market cap, and that puts Bitcoin at 55 or 60,000. I'm bullish gold as well, and so as a hard asset in this environment,